joined by Iqbal and Rob again for this, which is our Back to the Future session. But just by means of a very, very quick catch up for everyone who's joined us today. We started this series as a response to COVID-19. And we've been looking quite closely at where businesses are struggling, where businesses are flourishing, and what companies are doing from a technology perspective to survive and to flourish at the moment. So we ran these sessions up to about a fortnight ago, and it was Cisilion's year end 2 weeks ago. And just a quick update on that, we pleased to report that we achieved revenue growth of 11% year on year, which we're very proud of, and record margins as well, which tell us that our strategy to become more of a consultative managed service provider as opposed to a traditional reseller is really, really paying off. So I want to say thank you quickly to all of our partners who helped us achieve this, and to Team Cisilion as well. We couldn't have done it without you, and you guys rock. You know you do. Last week, slightly more somber. We were due to cover Cisco Live, but it was an easy decision to follow suit with Cisco and postpone our Cisco Live activity last week, showing Cisilian solidarity with those who are suffering any form of injustice around our world. So here we are, and as Marty McFly would say, let's get back to the future. And you know, thinking about the second film for me personally, the Nike self-tying shoes, the hoverboards, they've all got their own versions now in this day and age. But really, what fascinated me, and Rob, Iqbal, I hope the same, is the technology, almost the business technology. So the voice-activated meetings, the displays of guest information on video calls, and we're seeing this now across numerous vertical markets. And it also, the film highlights the power of brands that stay relevant, which ties right into our business continuity theme, I think. And just to call a couple out, Pepsi, AT&T, Black & Decker, all over the film, and some that are no longer around anymore. So today we're going to talk about the most innovative initiatives that we're helping our customers with just now, while we're trying to throw in a couple of Back to the Future puns in there as well. So in trying to open this paradox without destroying the universe, I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's our resident Back to the Future super fan, to talk about what you're seeing, Rob, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, and thanks, Craig, and hi to everybody. And yeah, I'm a fan. I think a lot of people at heart are Back to the Future fans, and I think it's quite funny in kind of preparation for today. I think a few of us have probably reached out and watched the film, and it's always quite strange to watch a film that's set in the future that's now in the past. You know, I remember sitting there watching the trilogy back in 2015, and it was quite eye-opening even then to think about the things. If you think, you know, this is now 35, it's a 35-year anniversary today, so this year of Back to the Future, and it is quite incredible to think about what people thought that future world would look like. And you probably got films like Back to the Future. There's obviously films like Minority Report, which is another one that people think about a lot when they think about what that future kind of looks like. And Craig, you touched on some of those things now that are there around how AI and intelligence is helping to give us information in a timely fashion that's relevant to what we're doing, rather than, you know, needing us to kind of sift through information and present things. And we're seeing this technology across, as you say, a lot of different areas, you know, whether that's through kind of pre-meeting information through products like Webex, whether it's around the information that gets surfaced through many of the Office 365 and Teams services, whether it's around you know, that just-in-time information about what your colleagues and what your team's doing and how people are working and other people you might want to reach out to. And I think it's, you know, we're just seeing this technology now in our lives and don't really think about it quite so much. But I think, you know, the thing I wanted to try and grab today really, and kind of where the Back to the Future theme kind of came from, was, you know, we spend a lot of time working with our customers across, you know, a lot of different sectors that we work in, and a lot of that involves us working with them on strategic initiatives and planning around kind of what the next 18 months, 2 years might look like, whether that's around moving to cloud, whether that's around new collaboration, whether that's around, you know, a complete changing direction that the organisation is going through. And of course, what's happened is all those plans that have kind of been designed and thought out and put into practice, and then COVID struck. And it kind of reminded me like Back to the Future, where, and for those of you that know the film, in in Back to the Future 2, you know, Marty and Doc travel into 2015. Biff, big bad guy Biff, steals the car, goes back to 1955, makes a load of changes, you know, makes it rich. And then when Doc and Marty come back to 1985, which is then the present time, so think about our COVID time, they come back to that time, the world is very different. And of course, the future that they could then potentially travel back to fix everything has now gone, because the future they would have moved to is an alternate future, not the future that they would have come from. So all quite complicated. There's lots of little diagrams that I've seen real space-time continuum scientists come up with, and all sorts of other things. But I think what this shows, and the relevance for this session today, is that, you know, we almost have to start again, right? For many organisations, what the future of work is going to look like, and where they're going to make their money, how they're going to interact with their clients, and how they're going to work with their teams is not known. It's not set, and so we have to think about how that's going to move forward. So before we have a little bit of a little bit of fun and talk about, you know, some of our favourite things from Back to the Future and things, what I was going to do was just very loosely talk through some of the different approaches that we are seeing organisations that we work with today going through, and how they're thinking about what the future is going to be for them, because, you know, that future isn't set. We don't know what that alternate post-COVID world is going to look like yet, because we're still not through it. We don't know whether there will be another wave of COVID later in the year. And I think, you know, what this has done is given people a real opportunity to rethink the future of their organisation looks like. Think about how office space is going to be consumed. Think about the types of people they need, and think about the kind of business that they are, by almost drawing a line under it. So, a very brief, what we're seeing is, you know, 5 approaches really, I guess, if I summarise. So number one is that wait and see. Right, so we don't know what's going to happen. The government keep changing the rules. They're different around the world. We don't know what's happening with travel. Therefore, let's sit tight. Let's not reinvest a load of money in office space. Let's see what happens. People are getting on working at home right now. Let's put a little bit of investment in making sure that, you know, people can get work done at home, because, you know, for many people now it's been 3 months. If you're a traditional office, you know, if you work in office, it's 3 months. You know, I think there's sectors that are very different. You know, if you work in leisure and retail and travel and hospitality and those kind of areas, much of what your future looks like will either be dictated by what happens with COVID, or how you reinvent yourselves as an organisation. If you kind of went back and thought about, you know, the blockbuster world, right, and thought, well, okay, if, you know, Blockbuster had been around right now, would that have created the Netflix of the time as it was, because the business would have had to evolve? So I think a lot of that's starting to happen. You know, I'm seeing, I do a bit of work with some art galleries, for example, other organisations that are very, you know, do a lot of inside demonstrational spaces, and they're looking at how they take those outside. Fortunately, we are in the summer period now, but they are having to completely reinvent themselves. So, but back to the kind of core office environment, I think, you know, you've got the sit and wait approach. You've then got the, what do we do about our workspace environment? And I think people are on the fence a little bit about what they do. Do they reinvest in the workplace? Do they make the workplace a different space now? Or do they close down workspace? And I think if you look at the expenses that a lot of organisations have, particularly in the professional services industries, so legal, insurance, finance, consultancy, etc., those real estate costs can be quite massive. And so, you know, thinking about what you do with those spaces and how you redesign them can obviously have a lot of cost. On the flip side of that, there's a question around, you know, saving money to reduce real estate costs versus harming the collaboration approach of the organisation and how people work. So there's a little bit of a kind of, what do we do in that space? The other side we're seeing then is we're going to make the space more collaborative. And what I mean by that is, for most people that go to an office, and we do a lot of work in public sector as well, where people go into the office and they work on the same desk every day. Or if you look at a lot of law firms, particularly in the US, there's still quite a big approach of having your own office and managers having their own offices. And it does seem quite crazy in some respects that most people spend 80 to 90% of their time in 2 or 3% of a space inside an organisation sat at their desk, where we've proven over the last 3 months that anybody can do focus work at home. Everybody can sit at home. We're all doing it. We're doing it now. We're using technology to make us collaborative. And therefore, will the future of the office be a space that you go to collaborate with your teams, to meet your partners and meet your customers, rather than a place you actually go to do hands-on work? So there's a lot of organisations that are kind of thinking about how that shift might work. The fourth thing, very briefly, is about recruitment. So how will recruitment happen? Are we going to see the ability to recruit people from further afield, whether that's in different countries, to allow us to have a more diverse workforce, to actually help with accessibility, to help with language, and to sometimes reduce costs or to get additional skill sets? And are we going to make that? Is that going to be an attractive offer to allow us to pay people less money by having the flexibility of remote working, or actually will we pay people because we don't want them to come in the office because we don't want to use the office space? So these are all other conversations that I'm seeing. And I think finally, and this is probably one that I'll ask you to jump in and comment on afterwards, is is this kind of working from home long term going to diminish productivity? And I think we all know at the moment that we've had to work from home. Those people that aren't on leave or taking extended absence from the workplace have had to adapt. But is that a long term strategy? Will that work long term? And I think a lot of this, to me, comes down to the difference between existing teams and new staff. So if I think about us three that are on this call now, we know each other. We're used to coming into the same office. We work on the same accounts together. Therefore, we generally get on and we know each other. However, if you bring new people into the organisation, how does that work? Where they've not had that physical bonding before with the team. So I think these are all things that are going through the minds of many of the organisations that we're talking to. As I said, the future isn't set, and there's no known answer to this. So Iqbal, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts and comments of any of those stages.
Yeah, I guess from just going back to your point there, COVID has pretty much changed the future for us all, right? So it kind of ties well back to part 2 and Back to the Future, and thinking about my kind of favorite moment in that particular movie. For me, the voice tech that was used within that movie, I felt like, that's something I could relate to. I can genuinely see how that could have a positive impact on our lives, and we've seen that in movies in the 80s and the 90s. You've got Knight Rider, for example, Kit being able to talk to your car. These things have now become part of our present, but we're still very early days yet, because that voice tech is only as good as the artificial intelligence that sits behind it. And we're certainly, I use Alexa. I know, Rob, you use Alexa, and we can obviously, doing some research, I've found that 40% of how we use that technology is used to just pull information rather than actually do anything in terms of being able to place orders for whatever we need. I mean, with Alexa in particular, you've got obviously the ability to place orders, but that's not something that's seen so regularly. Now, it's fine in our home lives. We can use this tech. It's great, and it's going to continue to evolve. But we've always struggled to see how that transition will be made across to the business world, into the enterprise. And I don't know if you all are aware, but Cisco have recently announced the release of Webex Assistant, which is down to an acquisition of Voicea that Cisco took over I think it's been about 6 months, and they've managed to transition that and embed that into their Webex product. And what this means is now we can genuinely start to see the benefits of how things like voice integration into a meeting can genuinely help you. And one of the benefits that I don't think has been deliberate, but being able to join a meeting without touching any devices or screens is definitely a big one. And many of the customers I'm speaking to are they're leading with that. They want now a meeting room solution that can join a meeting, call somebody, recognize you for who you are when you enter that room without you having to touch any device, or even being able to control that through your mobile. So that again is very powerful and will have a positive impact. For those meetings that are happening, things like live transcription, being able to take action, asking the assistant to be able to to take action and ensure that's been followed up. So once the meeting's ended, then any actions that need to be worked against are then assigned to the individuals. So that's going to continue to evolve, and I'm certainly looking forward to where the future, what the future holds when it comes to this stuff. But we've always, we've heard of this technology, but we've always struggled to see how the kind of customers that we work with, so the sectors that we focus on, insurance, finance, legal, they are now starting to scratch the surface with these things, and that's certainly one thing. Another thing that we've been quite busy doing recently is helping many of our customers whose users live in rural areas, have poor connections. I think we've all experienced it. I think even for those that have 500 meg internet connections are struggling, but for those users that haven't got the luxury of proper internet connections, we are looking at technology like smart boost signal routers to be able to enhance that 4G capability. So some of these technologies quite old, so we're having to go back to help people with some of these things in the future, and that's now becoming more relevant because we're all working from home more often, so we do need more reliable connections and connectivity. And the final one for me is in terms of looking at the future, speaking to particularly the areas I've mentioned, legal, finance, insurance, these guys are now trying to get their global offices, their global counterparts to be more connected and work more closely together. A lot of what I've seen from experiences, organizations have struggled to deploy a strategy that's fully aligned across different regions, and that's now becoming a reality because a lot of those services are being consumed from the cloud and are accessible in different regions, but more importantly, they're able to build a strategy that fits every single region based on their individual requirements. And that's definitely one of the key things that I'm seeing in terms of what the future holds. That's one of the key things that are being looked at right now, whilst we have more time to think about strategy, to try and help those global organizations come closer together. Craig, I'm going to pass it back over to you. I don't know if there's any other favorite moments that you've got, or in fact, I know that you've got some interesting stories to tell around the retail sector. So yeah. I look forward to hearing about that.
Cheers, Iqbal. And chaps, before I talk about retail and the other stuff I'm seeing, Iqbal, you've given me a bit of a headache, mate, mentioning Kit from Knight Rider. If you could call one car, both of you chaps, so you could either have a DeLorean or Kit. What you going to go?
Kit, mate. No,
Kit.
No, hands down.
Kit every day. Kit every day.
But why wouldn't you get a DeLorean and go back to the day Kit was made and take that back to the future with you? So, nice little side one there, yeah. With regards retail, I mean, Cisilion play mostly in the luxury, the high end retail. Very much mirrors our business model as anything. We're experts, we're innovators. Come to us rather than stack higher, sell cheap. So that's why we play there. And I've got to tell you guys, it's probably one of the most interesting, I would say exciting, but it's also worrying, right? So the power of wireless is key. Wi-Fi 6, 5G connectivity is coming. When we talk about the power of wireless, what retailers are talking about is it's twofold, right? So how do you replicate the online experience in store, such as such as Iqbal, you've gone to buy some stuff from Gucci. You come back a week later. How then will Gucci recognize you're back in the store to let you know of their latest updates? So that's really key, that online kind of upsell, automated upsell. We're seeing the foundations being laid for that with just about every retailer or luxury brand that we're talking about. The other one, and this is where wireless really kicks in, is replicating the in-store experience online. And how can you replicate someone's in-store experience if you don't know where they've been in the store? I mean, it's good to know what they've purchased, but where did they look around? Where did they hover? Integrating all of these data sources into one to provide better VIP services, better wayfinding. I mean, health and safety is huge as well. People coming in and out of buildings is easy to manage from a work perspective with HR, but people that shoppers and consumers walking in and out of different stores all day, that's a nightmare for people, of course. And using wireless to provide wayfinding, heat maps, directional, I touched on it a couple of weeks ago, is going to be huge. But I think the main driver, I mean, yes, health and safety is a huge driver, nobody wants a second wave, but I think what the retailers are now seeing is that there's an opportunity to monetize wireless. There's an opportunity to monetize technologies and providing those services. So that's really exciting. And if you keep an eye out on Bloomberg or any of the tech news or this podcast, more and more info will come out about that, guys, for yourselves. And just going, I guess, back into our more traditional industries, we're seeing so much go on in legal and insurance. Finance, not so much for me just now, but certainly our legal customers, top law firms around the world, top insurance companies around the world, they're thinking about these things. And for me, I guess the way our business, my side of the business works, we're talking a lot about governance, right? How do we get this right? How do we plan now for adoption and change of all these things in the future? And that starts with governance. That starts with a great network, for example. That starts with great connectivity, Iqbal, as you said, and Robert, as you're constantly telling us, great engagement from the people within the organisation. So I'm going 88 miles an hour this way, Rob. I'm gonna bring myself back to the future and maybe ask you from the more traditional industries point of view, what you're seeing in terms of innovation at scale.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is going to be the shell shock, the 1.21 gigawatts of shock of a lot of this kind of new technology that we've just been talking about, and Iqbal touched on some really great stuff that's emerging, and I think and again something we've touched on a couple of times in these sessions, but the biggest inhibitor to technology within more so the workplace than home is the pace of adoption and change and the confidence and knowledge of using that technology. And I think there's been vendors in the past, there'll be more in the future that will come out with this leading edge technology. And I think a lot of the time it's about at what point do you get on the bandwagon. There is there's been technology in the past, voice assistants and these kind of things. They're not that new now, but the uptake has been relatively slow. As Iqbal mentioned there with things like Alexa, you have the ability to pretty much order anything from Amazon, obviously, on your Alexa device by just asking it. But a lot of people are fearful of doing that because it may order the wrong thing. It may do something wrong. It might not quite understand what they say, and they may look a bit stupid. Whereas asking it for the weather is a pretty low end, easy task, and it probably understands you. And I think a lot of that's going to transpire as we look at a lot of these newer technologies, particularly around kind of voice capability. Where what if you're in a meeting, it doesn't understand you, and you ask it to invite Andrew or Craig into the meeting, and it actually invites the wrong Andrew or the wrong Craig into that meeting, and it can kind of feel a little bit embarrassing. Whereas if you do things manually, you kind of know where you are. And I think that's often the challenge around anything that's new. And I think what we've now seen is that things tend to go into the home before they come into the workplace. Whereas if you go back into the past, it was always the workplace that had the most modern and up-to-date technology, and then those things gradually emerged in home. I remember many years ago, back in the past going into the office because I'd have a decent fast internet connection, whereas now most people have a better internet connection at home than they do when they're in the office. So I think that's going to be a big shift. And I think what we've learned through COVID is people's ability and organisations' ability to change is all based on the situation. Organisations have had to change. Organisations will have to change to remain competitive, to stay in business, to be the leaders of what they do. And those that don't will probably struggle. I think we'll see a lot of organisations reinventing themselves. We're seeing, particularly in legal firms now, there's a lot more remote, a lot more video, a lot of it is all still around how you track your time and all those kind of things, but using different methods of communicating. We've seen it in retail, in the retail space. Craig, you touched on some of those things now about how you kind of create that connected retail experience. Yeah. Virtual shopping, virtual tours around a store. We're seeing it with education establishments as well, where they're doing, teachings not just about broadcasting a lesson and doing some PowerPoint, but it's actually, giving students mini avatars and, being able to have a digital representation of themselves in a classroom. We're seeing it with big global events, all these big events and Iqbal, we've got obviously Cisco Live again next week, which is a virtual event. Microsoft had Build a couple of weeks ago. There's a big Teams event in a couple of weeks, and all of these events are now starting to use digital technology to make people feel like they're more in that space. So you're able to walk around some of these big auditorium spaces as if you were there in person. So you can walk up to stands where you might go and see Cisco or Microsoft or Dell or whoever you want to go and talk to, and then you can engage in a conversation with somebody electronically, because it's all trying to recreate that physical world in the virtual world. And again, relating this back to Back to the Future, it's almost that kind of world of they land in 2015 and they walk into Hill Valley Square, and there's the big Jaws, Jaws 19 character that comes between them. And this is kind of what we're starting to see now, because people can't get out, they can't go to these big mass gatherings anymore, so the technology has to come to them. And again, people will adapt it because it's the new way of doing it, and it is a bit quirky, and it doesn't matter because you're now at home. And that's kind of very much my view of where I think these things will evolve.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Guys, I was just looking at the time. We might not have the full time for Iqbal's answer, but in terms of, I guess, the next part of that conversation, Rob, in terms of what's coming, what's the sexiest, newest technology out there. Cisco Live is back on next week, and Iqbal's going to be. We're covering that next Friday. I'll let Iqbal intro that. I guess just before we throw away to wrap up, quick round of questions, guys. We didn't get any from our audience today. Sorry. If the content wasn't on point today as it normally is, but I have a question for you both. Favorite Back to the Future film, Rob?
So I always say number 2, but I think number 2 wouldn't be number 2 without number 1. So I'm actually going to say number 1.
Cool. Iqbal?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's easy to say number 2, and actually when you look back at all 3, 2 is probably the best one. But yeah. I do agree. I think number 1 had the biggest impact. I think in terms of when it was released, it was something quite different at that time. Even though I was quite young back then, I did enjoy it. Just before I kind of wrap up, I just wanted to finish off around the kind of retail conversation. We're speaking to lots of enterprises and those that deal with customers, looking at how they can enhance that customer experience. How can we provide a more connected experience? And from a retailer's perspective, we're looking to also help those retailers introduce video into their applications, into their websites, so that if you're browsing for something and you need to speak to an assistant within a local shop, you're able to reach and connect to that retailer without having to go into that store. And that's now obviously becoming a lot more relevant. Whilst those retail shops will be occupied with staff, why not use that staff to be able to interact with local customers? And that's something that's achievable very easily with video technology. So I'm just gonna close it off there. And in the spirit of the theme today. We're gonna make like a tree and get out of here. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone.